mutations on the Witcher. They're very strong, they are very powerful, but you wouldn't actually get access to them until you manage to get all the way to the endgame on the DLC Blood and Wine. So that being the case, it is only natural to think that these are more useful once you're trying to get into New Game Plus, because at the end of the day, while Blood and Wine is actually quite lengthy, chances are that by the time you get to this place, you are not going to have necessity or the needed resources at hand to be able to focus yourself that much on this. Nevertheless, I do advise the usage of mutations because they are so very powerful indeed. They actually are. So in today's video, we're going to do a top of which are the best mutations in this thing. So basically, what we're going to do is that we're going to have different tiers. In this case scenario, since we only have so many mutations, it's going to be 3 different tiers. S tier, A tier, and B tier. S being amazing, the most impressive thing that you've ever wanted to have in your life, overpowered, delicious, juicy, gimme all that. A, it's nice to have it. I wouldn't personally choose it over different things, but it's nice to have it. And B, being the things that I would normally in my playthroughs I would never touch. I would stay the hell away from them like they were the plague itself. So that being the case, let's start with you are going to need to strengthen your synapses. Anyways, let's start with the basics ones. Deadly counter. Sword attacks deal 25 plus more damage to human opponents, immune to counter attacks and monsters. In all of the cases, if the attacker's vitality is less than 25%, a counter attack immediately triggers a finisher. It is something nice to use, it is something nice to have once you are starting up. But if we have in context the rest of them, if we have in consideration all of the other mutagens that I am going to be mentioning on this top tier, if you compare them, I guess, I mean, it's... I wouldn't use it. I guess it's a B. Never touch it. Yeah. This one, on the other hand, this is cool. Magic sensibilities. Signs can deal critical hits. The critical hit chance and damage increase with sign intensity. Currently 33% chance to deal additional 128% damage. Opponent's skill by critical hits from signs explode. This is basically on how you have your build set up. As you can see right now, my build that I have right now for this showcase, this is a melee build. So my sign intensity, it's really not that high. Even with not that high sign intensity, I have 33% chance to deal additional damage, 128% damage. Opponent's skill by these things explode, which means that it can work like a tornado, where everything is triggering one to another. That being the case, it has some degree of randomness, which is what I do not like about this one. It has like that degree of randomness, and when we have that degree of randomness in consideration, that is what I have in mind when I choose either to use it or not. Is it nice to have it? Yes, but you have that need of having to throw the dice to be able to use this one. So yeah, it's definitely an A. It's usable, I like it, very useful, but there are better ones than this one. Toxic Blood. Each time you are injured in melee combat, the attacking opponent receives damage in the amount of 3% of damage dealt for every point of your toxicity level, currently 3%, to a maximum of 300%. If your toxicity is top, you're going to return 300%. What is the thing here? That if you're playing like in normal difficulty, they're not actually going to be dealing that much damage to you because of the armor that you have. If you're playing on higher difficulties, you not really want to get hit by anything in those difficulties, because more often than not you're going to get one shot. Yes, it's going to help you with damage, but you do not need to use this thing as a main means of dealing damage to the enemy. So I would say that this is a B. Never touch it. No, I do not like it, dude. I do not like it. So, moving on to Euphoria. Oh boy, this baby. I love this one. Each point of toxicity increases damage dealt by swords and sign intensity by 0.75% to a maximum of 75%. Meaning, if you manage to be on 100 of toxicity threshold, you will have extra 75% damage at all times. This is one of the most broken mutations on the game because it's natively always 75% extra damage on top of the build. If you make a build and place this on top of that thing, it's going to skyrocket the damage of that baby bad boy. And this is good. It doesn't matter if you are using either a potion build, science build, melee build, you're always going to be benefiting from this thing. Every time that I start a fight, I always use Sanda and Swallow, not to mention the concoctions, which are very powerful. We're gonna be talking about those later, a little bit later. But the concoctions are very powerful, and they give you toxicity. And since you're always going to have toxicity, you're always going to have 75% extra damage, even for a science build. Benefit from that. A melee build, it's going to benefit from that. So this is definitely our first S tier skill. You need this thing. It's also quite cheap. Didn't mention that before in the beginning of the video. It is very expensive to get all of these skills. You do need to use quite a lot of mutagens, so this one really easy to get and real amazing to have. Now we have the mutated skin. Each adrenaline point decreases damage received by 15% to a maximum of 35%, meaning that if you have this thing active and you have all of your adrenaline points, you're always going to be taking away half of the damage you receive to your character. I do not like this one. And you wanna know why? Because more often than not, all of the builds that I made for this game, every time that I played, every time that I did something, I was using my adrenaline points. Adrenaline points are very useful. You want to use them. You want to use them to deal damage. And, well, if you are using them as a means of decreasing damage, dude, you have Quan. But you have Quan. You do not need this thing. It's just a waste of resources. Now, cat eyes, crossbow damage, B. I did not use. Anyways, it's now increased from 134 to 845. Values depend on the crossbow used. And crossbow critical hit chance is increased by 50%. Crossbow bolts pierce and knock down or stun opponents. Opponents struck when they have full vitality lose 15% vitality. More of the fights in this game are close quarters. You do not really get the luxury to get your crossbow ready and be using it on the fight. I rarely do I ever use my crossbow. The only reason I would use my crossbow for is when I am at sea and I have to kill enemies that are guarding treasures. But when you are at sea, they are instantly killed by one shot of the crossbow, so what's the point, right? So yeah, that being the case, I think this is a B. I would never use it. Don't find it useful. Let's go to Metamorphosis. Now, oh boy, did we get into the interesting ones. Applying a critical hit effects on opponents activates a random decoction for 120 seconds with no toxicity cost. No toxicity cost. The maximum number of decoctions that can be activated simultaneously by the mutation is 5, which senses help you see better in dark places. Now, what's not to love about this one? Although it is very situational. What I do like to point out in this thing is that, as you can see right here, you can activate simultaneously decoctions by 5. There's some very powerful decoctions that you have at hand. And the interesting thing about this thing, although the concoctions are very hard to come by because you need the specific mutagens to be able to craft them, That being the case, that being said, if you actually do use those things, they are going to trigger the ones that you have on your inventory, the ones that you have made, the ones that you have brewed, right? So if you only brew the ones that you like, you can end up being a Terminator just out there by doing critical hits. That's the thing that I do not like. You do not have control of those things. It's going to be random, and the decoctions are going to be random. You have some degree of control, because if you brew specific decoctions, then you're good to go. You have them in your inventory, the ones that you like to use. And if you have a bunch of decoctions that you have stashed in there just to collect them, that I wouldn't actually use Metamorphosis, because some of them are very crappy. Being the case, if you do have the ones that you like to use, yeah. But again, it involves that degree of randomness, so I would place this one on a B, leaning more into the S, but still a B. Blood Dart. Each fatal blow dealt by a sword dismembers the enemy or activates a finisher. Each blow dealt by a weapon in melee combat increases attack power by 5% until combat ends to a maximum of 250%. The bonus is lost if you take damage, not including damage from toxicity. This one I would call it a niche one. You know, being able to dismember enemies, it's nice, but in the next gen version, I do believe that was adjusted a little bit more, and dismemberment happens more often. So if you're using this for the looks, then yeah, it's not really that necessary anymore. If you're using this for the attack power, yes, 250 might sound like a huge lot. But if you have in mind that this is an RPG where hitboxes are not always in your favor, yeah, the hitboxes in this game are not perfect. This is not a Souls game, so you do need to have that in mind. You are going to get hits. You do need to find ways to mitigate the damage. You have Quen, but more often than not, to be able to kill an enemy, I mean, that's 5% for each enemy killed. I mean, each blow. By the time that the fight ends, if you have a proper build, you're not going to actually be dealing that many blows. So I would advise just you'd be better off with Euphoria at the end of the day. So B, it's not A leaning into a B. It's a niche one. I wouldn't use it over the Euphoria one. It is easier to get, but yeah, it's nice. If you like the dismemberment, then it is your thing. I would personally choose the Euphoria, and I would say that the Euphoria basically neglects this thing by all means. It just makes it useless compared to Adrenaline Rush. At start of combat, sword attack power and sign intensity increase per 30 seconds by 30% for each foe after first. So, when you're fighting 11 foes, bonus is 300%. Once it wears off, sword attack power and sign intensity drop by 10 for each participating foe after first. Modifier cannot exceed 75%. Duration 30 seconds. Again, it sounds like quite a whole lot of damage, and if you have a proper build, then more often than not, you are actually going to be having quite a good time. Your fights, if I'm being honest with you, my fights with a proper build in this game never last more than 30 seconds. Although, if your enemy AI being a sassy cunt that you do have in mind that they get away from you, or that it's hard to find them, or for example, if you're in Blood and Wine DLC, they are very far apart from one each other. So yeah, I mean, it's quite a whole lot of damage, a huge amount of damage. But to drop your damage from base, nah, dude. I mean, nah. Nah. This is a B. I wouldn't use it myself, personally. Now we have the second life. When vitality reaches 0, you become temporarily invulnerable and regenerate 100% vitality. This effect can only be triggered once every 120 seconds. I mean, yes, could definitely, most definitely be useful. For example, in that match difficulty, but there are many different ways of dealing with damage. Many different ways that will keep you alive. So in those kind of difficulties, you have to deal damage to stay away from death. A good defense is the best defense. Or what was no. A good defense is the best offense, or whatever that thing is called. Anyways, I just do nothing personally. Again, this is my personal opinion. I would never choose this one over one that would give me the advantage. Aggressive advantage. That's me. I'm an aggressive player. If you're one of those players that are struggling quite a lot in video games and you feel like this is going to help you, if you're dying way too much, then by all means, you can definitely take this one. But me personally, for me as a player, I will place this thing as a B. I would never use it myself. Now, Piercing Cold, oh boy, yeah. When Odd Sign is cast, it additionally has a 30% chance of freezing enemies. This chance scales with your available adrenaline points. Enemies knocked down and frozen simultaneously die immediately. Enemies who are not frozen are dealt an additional 2,372 damage. That's quite a lot. And do have in mind that, like I told you before, I like to use my adrenaline points offensively. My adrenaline points, I like to be used. I like for them to be used on the offense. I want to deal damage with them. I build my adrenaline points for that sole purpose. And this thing, you do have some control over those things. You're basically going to insta-kill people. So you start the fight, and then you build up your adrenaline point quite a little bit, and then after you have built your adrenaline points quite a little bit, you throw this thing to finish up everything that's left alive. It's huge damage. And if you pair this up with a build that has high sign intensity, then yeah, by all means, this is just going to be deadly and amazing. This is an S tier, and you do have control over it. That is one of the main factors that I have in mind when I decide either if it's an S, A, or B. You have control over it. And then finally, this one, Conductors of Magic. Oh boy, one of my favorites as well. When drawn magic, unique and witches' swords increase sign damage dealt by 50% of their own damage dealt. So basically, you get free extra sign damage so long as you're using magic, unique, or school gear weapons. And to be completely honest, why would you not? Why would you not be using magical weapons? There are so many magical weapons, so many sets, so many relics, that if you are using basic weapons, then I don't know what the hell are you playing, dude. And if you're going for a science build, you're basically just have that extra 50% of their own damage dealt. They have some huge damage, especially Erendite, for example, if you manage to scale it. And if you pair up all of the sign damage that you're going to have with many other things, and like I said, you do have control over this thing, you don't actually have to wait too much. The conductions for this thing, it would be first Magic Sensibilities, then Piercing Cold, and then finally this one. Well, yeah, it's actually it actually is quite an investment, but nevertheless, I would call this an S. Definitely, it's an S. For a science build, this is something that I would definitely find myself picking yes, of course. Anyways, that being said, if you like the content, liking the video is super appreciated. And if you find the video informative, then a subscription to the channel. We talk about RPGs in here, and remember that no one has told you today that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You are indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Remember to like the video, subscribe before you close the door. I will see you goddamn gorgeous and beautiful people in the next one. Goodbye.